We're still in investigation 3.1, and we are right now focusing on part C of the investigation. So part C says, do the following for each of the three average speeds. Look for patterns relating distance and time in the table and graph. All right, so to look for a pattern. Now this is where you're going to probably need to take some notes. All right, you may not want to take notes right on this sheet because I'm going to write on this because I have the board. But you might want to do it either on a separate piece of paper or maybe even on the back, your choice. So what we're basically doing is this: to find a pattern, in table, you subtract one value from another. All right, so I'm just writing that for right now. You can actually clean it up however you want. I may decide to actually change the wording of that as we go through this. But what I'm basically saying is this: to go from 0 to 50, that is basically a change of 50. 50 to 100 is a change of 50. And what I'm basically doing is I'm basically saying 100 minus 50 equals 50. For this one I did 50 minus 0 equals 50. So for the next one, it would be 150 minus 100, which is still 50. So what you'll basically see is that the difference from one value to the next in my table is 50. Now the trick is this. All right, this, if you remember, is my x values. And this is why you need to understand the graph. So all of my x values, or all my variables for x, they are all increasing by 1. Okay? What I'm looking for, when I'm looking for the pattern, I'm trying to find the pattern. The pattern is in y variable. Okay, I'm going to make another little note over here. X must increase by 1. Okay, so my x is increasing by 1. So therefore, this is going to make finding the pattern so much easier. There will be problems later on to make it more complicated where x is changing by a different amount besides 1. But x, basically, your x variable has to be increasing by a set pattern, ideally by 1. Your y value should be increasing by a particular pattern. When you subtract, you should be able to see it. So that's how I know. Because these are all 50, I know that that it's increasing at a set pattern. Looking at the graph. All right, so for the graph, all right, a pattern in graph will have a constant rate of change, or a straight line. Okay, whether you can actually connect the coordinates or not doesn't really matter in this particular stage. If when you connect them, whether you can or can't, if you were to connect the coordinates, would it make a straight line? If it does make a straight line, then you have a pattern. okay? If it doesn't make a straight line, then you don't have a pattern, and that's by looking at a graph. So it's very easy with the graph. So with the graph, straight line, it's in a pattern. With the table, you have to actually figure out if there is a set pattern. Now, because we're dealing with speed, we already know that there's a pattern. So for all the other ones, you know that the pattern here is going to be 55. The pattern for 60 is going to be 60. Okay? So it's very easy to find a pattern whether you're looking at the table or the graph. With the table, you have to do an actual calculation. With the graph, it's just, does it have a straight line? So that takes care of part C, number 1. All right, well, that's part of it. The second part is write a rule in words for calculating the distance traveled in any given time. All right, so the rule, I kind of alluded to this earlier when I was discussing some stuff. And so what I want to do is, I need to get some space here. So I got to erase. This is why I said do it on the back. Okay. So my rule would be, and I'm going to use the 50 miles per hour one. So the way that I write that out is for every hour, and you notice that I started with the x first. All right, when you read a graph, you always start with your x. Same thing when you're trying to come up with a rule. All right, so for every hour, my distance increases by 50. Okay? So that's basically what we're doing. So every hour, your distance is increasing by 50. By 50 miles. Ooh. Okay. Now the same thing is going to apply for the 55s. Just that instead of by 50, you're going to say increases by 55. 55 miles. For 60, increases by 60 miles. All right. So now, are we done with C1? We're done with C1. All right, so the next thing asks you to write an equation. For writing the equation, I'm actually going to go to another video for that. Because there's actually quite a bit that I want to say about writing an equation, but I'm not sure will fit on this. So that is it for this particular video. And listen to the next one for how to write an equation.